Hey, everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia, back with the latest episode of the JungleRoar podcast, powered by FanDuel Sportsbook, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. Back with me. It's the start of the offseason, so what better figure, what better guest to have on at this point in time to discuss everything that the Bengals need and then some, other than James Rapien of allbengals.com, si.com, and Locked On Bengals podcast. James, we have a little extra time this offseason, don't we?
We do. We do. Some time to get some R&R to prepare for the combine, which is something we haven't had the luxury of doing.
Nope.
And I will take it, my friend, from a personal standpoint, not complaining one bit that we have a few extra weeks. But it's obvious that this was a disappointing outcome in going into this season. If you would have said 9-8, no playoffs, everyone would have been bummed for obvious reasons. So disappointing season, but I'm not complaining about the extra rest.
Let's start at the top, James. I think a lot of people are wondering the status of Joe Burrow. He held a postseason wrap-up news conference on Monday as players were getting ready for their physicals Monday and Tuesday. And he touched on a number of topics, the first of which, of course, was his health. And he was naturally asked, when will he be ready to start throwing again? He was hopeful that by OTAs, he might start throwing the football around. But first and foremost, he wants to get healthy, and he wants to make sure that wrist is fully healed.
And I've described it this way on all of my platforms, and I think it's the best way to describe it. It's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is it's going to take a lot of time to heal.
Right.
And he has that time. The fact that he has it. The curse is this is a serious wrist injury to his throwing hand. Like, this is not a break. This is not something that takes 6 weeks or 8 weeks. There was zero chance he was returning for a playoff run. And I know some thought about that because you think of the wrist and you're like, oh, well, it's just a little ligament, but it's pretty serious, substantial injury. The good news is it's healing and he has time to let it heal. The downside is it's much more serious than a break would be traditionally. And so I hope that he does exactly what he's told, and I think he will, and I think he'll be back hopefully for training camp at 100%. I don't think he'll be 100% at OTAs. I think even though he could be throwing then, I'm not sure he'll be making the full assortment of throws, but hopefully he could finally have a healthy training camp, which is going to be such a big topic that we're going to say about 5,000 times over the next 6 months.
Yeah, I kind of dread that. But, the one thing that concerns me, James, is the fact that Joe Burrow is an intensely competitive individual. He, by his own admission, has worked himself hard in every offseason that he has had, maybe to the point of exhaustion heading into camp. And, when he touched on that on Monday, maybe he'll take the foot off the gas a little bit in terms of his conditioning going into training camp. Maybe some of that will be predicated by the fact and mandated by the fact that he's coming off the wrist injury. But mentally, how does he handle the wrist injury? How does he handle the going at a much more controlled, slower pace just to make sure that the wrist heals? That's my biggest concern for Burrow in the offseason.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One thing, and especially after he mentioned the foot on the gas going into training camp.
Right.
And I thought back to last year when he talked to us at the end of the offseason program. Or it might have been the beginning, but it was during the offseason program. And he said he wanted to be the best in the world. And then at the end of the program, I think we talked to him again, and he said, well, this is the season now. Like, I'm not slowing down. No, we're in season. Like, in his mind,
I do remember that. Yes.
And that probably should change. Even then, I was like, man, the season's a grind. Like, I'm not in season yet. I'm not in season mode. And I get his logic of push.
Right.
But once the season starts, you have to play through injuries, through shoulder nicks and calves and all the knees and everything that he's dealt with over the past 4 seasons. But you don't have to do that now. And so I do think he has the maturity to understand that. And it will be challenging, especially the not weightlifting part. There's a reason I asked him about that, because the mental element of just being able to grip weights and lift, he loves that. And I get it. I can relate to that. You can't. But no, I'm just kidding. But dang. I forgot we were recording, Trags. But
Sure
I,
you
I
did,
think
James.
I think that element is an interesting dynamic. And I have heard that he has just been in the weight room like crazy still. And it's probably to mentally keep himself at bay from just being super bored and not knowing what to
Yeah.
do because he can't grip weights with his right hand. And so I do think he'll be mature enough to deal with this, but you're right, it is a mental hurdle. I think that's probably the hardest part.
The second list of items in terms of priority I want to get to with regard to Joe Burrow is him pretty much going out of his way saying, we all expect Tee Higgins back. That may just be lip service. He may know that, look, at the end of the day, the Bengals and David Mulligetta of Athletes First, his, T's agent, may not be able to work something out. But I think it was important for Burrow to say publicly, the expectation is that we want to run it back at least one more year. How did you read it?
Well, he didn't say that though. Not the 1 year part, just to be
No,
clear.
but he clearly
He,
made it clear that they want Tee Higgins back. Yes, and that they expect him back,
sure, no doubt
right?
about it. And I think it puts pressure on two sides now. It puts pressure on T, it puts pressure on the Bengals. And what needs to happen. And what should happen is the Bengals should resign T. That's what should happen. I'll be very, very clear. Why? It's pretty simple. They drafted him, they developed him. He's a really, really good receiver, and he's going to be 25 years old, not 30.
Correct.
He's not in year 9. He's not at a devalued position. Wide receiver is as valuable as it's ever been in the history of the NFL. So you should sign Tee Higgins. And I know Jamar Chase exists, and I know Joe Burrow exists, but they should. And he should, since he's playing with Joe Burrow and looking around the league about some of these receivers catching passes from Aiden O'Connell and different situations that you have to deal with. I assume T wants to be back as well on a long-term deal. And so I know expectations are franchise tag, and that's what will happen if a deal doesn't get done. But both sides need to be willing to deal. And I do wonder if they can get something done. But if they're willing and open to it, and T isn't asking for the world, which by the way, I don't think he is. Now, his agent, David, please call me so we can discuss. I don't know what you're asking the Bengals, but I don't think T is asking for the world. I think he wants to be paid fairly. I do wonder if they can find a common ground, and that would be huge for this team, for this franchise, if they could sign Tee Higgins to a long-term extension. And that long-term could be 3 years. It doesn't need to be 4 years, but sign him for a multi-year deal. That would be huge.
3 years, 75 million. Would that get it done?
It would. I think if I'm the Bengals, I would try if I'm the Bengals for the fourth. If you're T, you're more likely to want the 3 year, which if I'm the Bengals, I'm probably okay with it. I think it would be like 372. DK Metcalf was in that range. I think it would be similar to that. But maybe it's 4 for 88, which is essentially that franchise tag number. I think the key to it, and Jamar Chase mentioned it to us when different reporters asked about his contract. I think Ben asked, what's the most important thing
Up
to you
front.
in a contract? He said upfront money. And he said, oh, guarantees in year 2, because that's what the Bengals don't do. Outside of Joe Burrow, no one gets guarantees in year 2. And here's why I don't really understand that. Like Trey Hendrickson, he didn't get guaranteed money in year 2, but it became guaranteed like the third day of the year if he was on the roster in year 2. And all that really does is protect the franchise from a catastrophic, like crazy injury, catastrophic injury. Tee Higgins is 24 going on 25. Like you can guarantee the first 2 years of his deal. In this modern NFL, it makes sense to. So we'll see. But I think that could be the hurdle, and either the difference between tagging T and letting him play it out, or potentially trading him, or signing him and keeping him in Cincinnati for multi-years.
If you're going to have the offense that the Bengals have, I think you should have the best weapons available, meaning the Bengals are not going to turn into the Cleveland Browns or the Baltimore Ravens or the Pittsburgh Steelers. As much as many fans would like to see them lean in that direction, Zach Taylor's made it clear that if we have Joe Burrow as our quarterback, we want to build the best weapons around him. And the best weapons around him include having Jamar and T, two guys who know the system, who perform at an elite level. I think both of them, you could say that. And why not bring them both back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think how many Tee Higginses are there in this loaded wide receiver draft class? Three?
Three. I'd say three. Sure. Adunzier is maybe my favorite. Marvin Harrison is another. And
Neighbors out of LSU.
Neighbors out of
There
LSU.
aren't
Sure.
many, and even those guys, there aren't many 6'4", 220-pound guys that can run a 4.4.
Right.
And high point at like T. And we've seen T get stronger and stronger. I mean, I know he dealt with injuries this year, but there's no doubt that that dude is a freak. And so I, unless they find that top number 2 weapon elsewhere, like who's your number 2? Who's your best number 2 weapon right now if Tee Higgins is not on the roster?
Chase Brown.
That's unbelievable.
Well,
Because
I
now
mean,
you're
am I right or
no, you're probably right, but like that can't happen. That can't be your number 2 weapon.
correct?
Like if, let's say they had drafted Dalton Kincaid right last year, if he had fallen to them in the first round,
That'd
they had
be
taken him.
yeah,
He clearly would be their number 2
correct.
right away from the jump. Jahmyr Gibbs would have been their number 2 from the jump. And based on Tee Higgins' availability this past year, you need him to be healthy, of course. You need Burrow to be healthy. And I do wonder, that's the only thing when it comes to this scenario where you're paying, because no one doubts you got to pay Jamar Chase. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins. If you lose one of those guys, will you be able to overcome it? And obviously, if they had Burrow this year, and it would probably have been fine. But giving up that much money, that amount of resources to 3 guys, that is tough. And I get that. I also think it's really, really hard to find a Tee Higgins. And it's one of 2 things. Either you sign him long term, or to me, you get premium value for him, which I think you still would get because of how special he is.
Cincinnati running backs room. Of the 4 running backs that were in there at the end of the season, is Chase Brown the only one that's back for 2024?
Is it GM James or GM Bengals in current situation?
GM James, because I'm having GM James on the JungleRoar podcast this second week in January. Go.
I'll start with that. Are you paying Joe Mixon $3 million on March 16th?
No.
He's guaranteed $3 million roster bonus on March 16th.
Right.
I wrote about it on Wednesday at All Bengals. Like, that's pretty easy to me. Pretty easy to me what the decision is. Now, doesn't mean Joe wasn't effective at times this year. But man, is he any different? Because everyone just dismisses Tyler Boyd, right? And I don't dismiss Joe Mixon either, even though he may think I do. I don't, whatever. But no one doubts that the Bengals can replace Tyler Boyd for cheaper. Nobody. And they say Charlie Jones or Andre Yosavash, or right? No one doubts that, even though he's been a serviceable third receiver, certainly. A quality veteran, a good locker room guy, all of the things that they say about Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd was a captain last year in 2022 as well. All of those things, right? No one doubts that they can replace Boyd for less than the $8 million they're paying him, or that he could get on the market. Well, of course they could find what Joe Mixon gives them for less. And whether it's Chase Brown and a veteran, or the route I would probably go, Chase Brown, another rookie, in a low-end money veteran, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, stay healthy during the playoffs, because I think the Bengals may give you a call. I that's the route I would go, because you get cheaper in the running back room. You're going to probably be more explosive, which I think is the key. They're not a run-first team. They never will be a run-first team, to your point, but they need explosive plays from the run game. That's what they need. That's what puts pressure on opposing defenses. Defenses don't really give a damn.
Let me interrupt you right there.
3.8.
Do they have the potential of being the Miami Dolphins? In terms of, the Dolphins have one of the most explosive, efficient run games, and they have 2 elite premier wide receivers, right?
Yes,
Hill
absolutely.
Do they have the potential of being the Miami Dolphins in that regard in the run game?
Sure. Absolutely.
That's what I think they should shoot for, no?
Absolutely. The home runs. because the home runs make opposing defensive coordinators stay up at night, not the 4.2 yards per carry or 4 yards. And I'm not saying you don't need a short yardage back. I'm saying you can get one for less than an $8.9 million cap hit.
Correct.
That's
On board with
especially
you right
because
there.
especially because you know what else you're going to ask me about? We've talked about wide receiver, running back. You're going to ask me about defensive tackle, offensive tackle.
Sure am. You got my notes right in front of you.
All of these premium positions that cost money to address. They cost money to address. And you're not going into the draft banking on taking one of them early because you never know how the draft is going to play out. So I think from that aspect, it makes sense to cut costs there the same way it does with Boyd, the same way it does to say, all right, Tyler, thank you so much for your service, but we're going to move on. I feel like it's the same way with Mixon, and even more so because wide receiver is a more important position, even the slot position. I think Charlie Jones, if he's your starting slot receiver, is going to be more important than Chase Brown in a lot of games next year. A lot of games.
I think we could have a conversation about that. I think they could be equally important, but I still think Chase Brown gives them the explosiveness that they don't have or didn't have for much of the last 2 years at the running back position. That would be the argument I'd make.
Sure. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But I think most of the game, like most games, you're still going to be relying on Burrow. You're going to be relying on his arm, even when it comes to the running backs. Part of the explosion is catching it out of the backfield and running and making big plays. And yeah, the screen game worked this year for the running backs, but that was it. I think, to me, I think Joe's still an effective running back for what he is. I think they can get the same effectiveness for less. And I also think it's honestly probably unfair to ask him to take another cut, restructure his deal again, or rip up his deal. There's a reason that $3 million roster bonus was put in there on the fourth day of the new league year on March 16th. And it's because it gives the Bengals an out and it gives the Joe Mixon security of knowing at least, hey, I'm not on the team and I have time to find somewhere else, or I am on the team and I can rest easy, not have a summer like he did last year, which I get was probably taking a toll on everybody.
Let's move to defense. You know Dax Hill, I'd say very well as anybody who covers the Bengals, and you've talked to him a lot. Is he capable of being the vocal leader in the back of the Bengals defense that Zach Taylor has mentioned and that Jesse Bates was as he grew up as a safety? Does Dax Hill have that next level in terms of leadership and voice?
I certainly think he's capable of that. It's so interesting, Trags, because I remember interviewing Jesse Bates shortly after he got drafted, and he was a second rounder, about 20 picks past Dax, less than that, 15 picks, I think he was, past Dax. And Dax was a first rounder, 31st overall. But he comes in and ends up beating George Iloka out for that starting job in camp. And part of that had to do with money and all the same things where you can get more for less if you move on, all that dilemma. And that's what the Bengals did in 2018. And he flashed. He had his moments, certainly, where it's like, man, his instincts and coverage, all of those things. There were also missed tackles. And there were different issues with Jesse Bates in 2018 and 2019. And then 2020 happens, and you look and you're like, man, this dude, he is the defense. He's the guy. DJ Reader's hurt. Trey Waynes was a bust and hurt in free agency. And it's Jesse Bates and just putting out fires all over. And I'm not going to say that Dax Hill can beat Jesse Bates, but I do think he's mature enough, athletic enough. I think the communication does need to be worked on. He's just not a loud guy. I think he's fine communicating. I just don't think he's a loud guy. So that part does, not that he needs to start being louder, but he needs to be able to communicate despite not being the Cam Taylor Britt, so to speak, where he's just loud and outgoing and you feel him in every room. But I think all the physical traits are there. In some of it just comes with playing deep safety, which he didn't do a lot at Michigan. And I really do. I believe, and this isn't because I have a good relationship with Dax. I've talked to people in the league that have watched every snap of Dax Hill's entire Bengals career much closer than even me or you have. And he was really good on tight ends this year. Took some bad angles. Obviously, the George Pickens play, we remember. drops some interceptions. Like there's some things he needs to work on. But he's also a few plays away from having 5 or 6 interceptions in his first year as a starter. He had 110 tackles. He ended up with 2 picks and 11 passes defensed. Jesse Bates didn't get 11 passes defensed in his first couple of years. I think it was year 2 or year 3 when he finally got to that number. So I really do. I believe Dax Hill is going to be a quality player. Will he be a Pro Bowler like Jesse? I don't know. Will he be an All-Pro? I don't know. But I don't think that is a weakness going into the offseason. I don't think they need to go spend at safety. I think maybe they draft one to have another young safety in the pipeline, but I'm not sure that they'll spend big money at the safety spot.
I think they could make him I've toyed around with this in my mind, and I'm sure Lou has also some type of hybrid position. And it's why, in part, the Bengals don't use the terms, and Lou doesn't use the terms free safety and strong safety, because they move them around so much and they have different positions. But, I don't know. I think they might, if there's a safety out there, and the name's been thrown out there, Harrison Smith or someone of his ilk, a veteran that they can sign for 1 year, maybe 2 years, bring them in and provide some veteran stability on the back end, I think they do it.
I think I don't. Actually, I don't. I would be shocked if they spend more than the $2 million they could potentially save by moving on from Nick Scott at safety this offseason. So if you could do it for that, okay. I think Dax, that's who they're going. It's going to be Dax and Battle. And, Dax Hill and Jordan Battle.
Right.
And they'll go to battle with those guys. I would be surprised. Now, who knows? Maybe I'm dead wrong. And they go out and they do that. But I think they're going to be banking on these young guys to develop.
And maybe I could see either one. Go ahead.
Sorry, just because you chose not to spend big money there already. Like, you chose this path. And the reason you chose this path is because of the roster. And to me, what helps the safeties more? Investing in defensive tackle or getting another safety? Because there's no guarantee that veteran safety is going to be any better than Nick Scott was in Lou's system, unless you're spending big money on one of these premier guys, which you just decided not to do with Jesse, who was arguably the best safety for your defense. So I don't think the front office will overreact to a downturn towards the back half of the season there for Dax, because he did start really promising. I think that's what people forget. People were blaming Nick Scott for everything for a bit, and I get it. Nick Scott was pretty bad when he was starting, and Dax Hill was kind of the guy. People were like, man, he's flashing. And now Jordan Battle's the guy. People were like, man, he's flashing. And Dax kind of ended the year on a whimper. I think both guys will be banking on, and they're banking on them to take a step forward this offseason.
Cam Taylor-Britt was at the UC Texas game on Tuesday night. He is certainly one of the leaders of the Bengals. He is a future captain in my mind, no question about it. He just has all of the elements, all of the characteristics you look for in a team leader. And he's charismatic, and I think he's very energetic. What do you think of Cam Taylor as a potential captain going forward?
I love it. I love it. The first home game, so it would have been the Ravens game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the sidelines before the game and near the tunnel, and Ted Karras walks out, does his thing where he looks around. And I love that. I love watching guys, their mannerisms before the game. And Trey Hendrickson has this Bane style thing where he's got his hands on his collar and he's got his big mouthpiece in, and he literally looks like Bane from Batman. It's like, man, please don't punch me in the gut like Bane did to Batman in The Dark Knight Rises, because I won't get up, much like Christian Bale. Anyways, guess who was breaking that team down? Guys like Ted Karras and veterans. It was Cam Taylor-Britt. Mm-hmm. Cam Taylor-Britt's the guy who was doing that, and it's because he brings energy and enthusiasm, and he thinks he's the best player on every field. And guess what? He's starting to become that. We saw that. We saw those flashes. And it doesn't mean it was perfect in year 2, but I think going up against Jamar Chase every day in training camp was huge for him. It was great. It was great for his development. and he started to really believe that he could be one of these high-end number one corners in this league. And he took a big step in, guess what year, Trags? Year 2 of starting and playing. And so I think that that's big, and that gives me hope, certainly, that DJ Turner can do the same thing. Jordan Battle can do the same thing. Dax Hill, who didn't play much as a rookie, can do the same thing. And Cam Taylor-Britt was able to take little steps forward at the end of his rookie year, and obviously he built on that this past year. And so, yeah, I do. I think he'll be a captain next season, no doubt.
DJ Reader, what do you do about the defensive line? And in the perfect world, do the Bengals consider going after Chris Jones in free agency?
Ooh. All right, let's start with DJ Reader.
Okay.
Because the Chris Jones things is what DJ Reader, what does he want? Does he want the 3 years, 45 million, or 2 years, 30 million? Because the Bengals won't do that.
Right.
I know they won't. They're not giving him, they're not giving him 15 million. I think if you could bring him back on a 1-year deal for $8 million, $10 million, where he's probably not starting this season, but you can bring him back. Heck, maybe it's a 2-year deal. I don't know. I don't know what he would want, but where it's reasonable, where they can make the cap work while also adding young talent in that defensive line room. I think they'll certainly want to do that. Now, you have to get younger in that defensive line room. Josh Chupo's a free agent. Zach Carter is not the answer as far as a starter is concerned. I think we certainly know that answer. And so you have BJ Hill. Maybe you bring back Chupo. That's fine. And what else? And so you need maybe, yeah, right. But that's what is that? That's not enough. That's not good enough. So I think that they need to add probably 2 free agent defensive linemen, defensive tackles, to be clear, and then they'll be in play for one in the draft as well. And maybe that's at 18, right? Everyone's talking about the Newton kid. Who knows if he makes it to 18? But you can't go into the draft needing to take one super early. And so I expect them to spend at defensive tackle. And that's just to tie it back. If you made it this far into the pod, that's why I look at running back the way I do. That's the way I look at Tyler Boyd the way I do, because you have to take those things and use them elsewhere. That's why I look at safety the way I do, because defensive tackles, they cost. Even the average ones cost more than you'd expect.
Yeah, and Chris Jones.
Oh, yeah, Chris Jones. I would be shocked.
I think he solves a lot of things and a lot of problems. And 3 years, let's say he gets, what, 22 million a year? How much is Chris Jones going to get?
He wants 3 years, 90 million.
That might be a bit rich. I mean, we thought that, right? We didn't see Orlando Brown Jr. coming in the offseason. Everybody has asked me, Trags, who is going to be the Orlando Brown Jr. signing of this offseason? The signing nobody sees coming. But, hey, it made a statement about the Bengals fortifying their offensive line. This year, maybe it's the defensive line, and they shock somebody or shock us with a signing we didn't see coming.
Yeah, they certainly could. I think that's it's just really unlikely that it would be Chris Jones because of how dominant he is and what he brings. I'll say this. The Bengals have to be aggressive isn't the right word, but I'll use aggressive. More aggressive in free agency this year. They can't, because Orlando Brown Jr. kind of saved the free agency. It kind of did.
Yeah,
and
it did.
Kind of fell,
You're right.
And it kind of fell into their lap. And I'm not sure what's falling into their lap this year. And obviously they know that they can't bank on that. So I think much like they did to start the 2021 offseason after the Super Bowl run, where they go out and they get Kappa 1 minute into the legal tampering period. A few hours later, Ted Karras signs, and it's like Kappa, Karras, boom, the offensive line. It should kind of be that way with defensive tackle to a degree. It doesn't mean you have to go after Chris Jones, but you have to elevate that room. And maybe that is DJ Reader and you bring him back before free agency or when free agency starts after he tests his market, or maybe it's someone else. Maybe T.R. Tart. They did put a claim in on him. Well, he's set to be a free agent. You never know. But I do think that they're going to have to spend some money at that spot. Chris Jones, a little too rich. Would you do it? Let me ask you this real quick. Would you sign Chris Jones if it meant you couldn't keep T, even on the tag?
No, I would not do that. I would want to, if you're asking me, essentially you're asking me either or.
Yes.
I would keep Tee Higgins. I mean,
Okay,
Tee
just
Higgins is
curious.
absolutely vital to what you're doing on offense and a vital weapon to your best player. So no, I'd keep T.
Yeah, I was just curious, but I think Chris Jones is lofty, but never say never because this team has surprised us before, and I do think that they're going to be aggressive in addressing that DT spot this offseason.
He is James Rapien of allbengals.com and Locked On Bengals podcast. I want one playoff special pick this week from James Rapien.
I think the Rams are going to beat the Lions by 10.
Wow. Reason?
I think their offense is legit. I'm not sure Detroit can get after Matt Stafford. And if you're trusting Jared Goff over Matt Stafford, then I have a house to sell you for $1.5 million, Trags.
Greater Cincinnati area?
Hey, it'll be any area you want. Just know I'm going to make a lot of money on it. I'll buy it and
Anything
then
to
I'll sell
cut
it to
down
you.
my commute, which I've been complaining and bitching and moaning about of late. But no, I love where I
I
live.
agree with you. There's a reason why when we were looking up your way, I was like, nah, I gotta get closer to downtown, man. This traffic is no fun.
I like the Houston Texans over the Cleveland Browns. There's something about CJ Stroud and the Texans at home, and I get it. The Browns have the best defense in football, and they are a 2.5 point favorite on the road, which you almost never see happen. But I like the Texans.
I like the Chiefs to beat the Dolphins by 25.
Oh, I think that's an obvious. It's going to be what,
Yeah.
-12 wind chill?
Yep.
It's going to be ridiculously cold Saturday night. The Dolphins are not built for that. And as long as the Chiefs don't allow 3 or 4 explosive runs, I agree with you. I think Chiefs all over the Dolphins in that game.
Yep. Yeah, it should be fun. I'm excited to watch the playoffs. As weird as it is not covering them,
Yep.
we were certainly blessed for a couple of seasons, and this is really weird for you because you're really used to from your Patriots days covering postseason runs. Did
Well,
you know Trax covered the Patriots?
it's been since 2008 that I've covered an NFL team that did not make the playoffs. So it's been a while, James. It's
Yeah. Well,
been
I think
a while.
much like '08 when the quarterback got hurt,
Yep.
and the team you covered ended up with a winning record but didn't get in.
Correct.
It'll be similar. Hopefully, the 2024-25 Bengals are better than the '09 Patriots, though, because Ray Rice ran all over them, I believe.
Hey, you know the guy that complimented you in the locker room and on being buff and working out and looking like Mr. Strongman, Ted Karras. I want 30 seconds, 30 to 45 seconds on his award, the Walter Payton Man of the Year Charity Challenge Award, not the main one that will be handed out at the Super Bowl, but he did earn the $35,000 for Village of Marici, an incredible cause. Just your thoughts on Ted winning that honor.
He should get both, by the way. I think that, look, what he's doing is directly impacting so many people. It's why I partnered with him in the Cincinnati. I love the project. I love that he's been in Cincinnati for 2 years, but it feels like he's a Cincinnati native. And it feels like he's been a Bengal for a decade. I mean, it's wild to think about how entrenched he is into this community. So couldn't be happier for Ted. Couldn't be happier for Cincy Hat Matt as well, who does a lot of behind the scenes stuff for them. So, and I couldn't be happier for the Village of Marici, who obviously can use that money and put it to really good use.
As I like to say, James, he's doing God's work, and he should be commended for it and helping out so many people, thousands of people who really need that type of assistance. He is James Rapien. You can follow all of his tremendous work on allbengals.com, si.com, and lockedonbengals.com. Anywhere else, by the way, you want to throw in there for a plug?
Cincinnati Bengals talk on YouTube, and get Enter the Jungle wherever books are sold.
And you can see 2 copies of that behind James if you are watching this podcast on YouTube. Please feel free to click and subscribe at JungleRoar Pod on my YouTube page. Again, he is James Rapien. James, thanks for taking time out. And until next week, I'm Mike Petralia. This has been the JungleRoar Podcast, powered by FanDuel Sportsbook, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. Keep that jungle roaring.